Hello and welcome back to another episode of the InnerFight podcast. I hope you've had an awesome week and I hope you're ready to listen to a little bit of a story. Today, it's just me. You might have noticed a little bit of a pattern emerging here. 1 week a guest and the second week myself rambling. Is that the right word? Hopefully some of you find it partially useful. If not, please do let me know. If you want more guests, also let me know. I'm always looking for guests, interesting people to talk to. But today, as I said, I'm alone and I am here to talk all about running and riding, which for me has been I guess you could say, a large part of my life since my early life, which I will go into. And the first part of the show is a little bit of a recollection of when I guess you could say when I first learned to run and ride. I'm not sure if that's right. But when I first remember running and riding and what my early childhood memories of running and riding are all about. And then I move more into what I think is the more interesting part, which might actually be more challenging for a lot of people, looking at the impact of running and riding, cycling, mountain biking, various different forms of riding on their life, and therefore leading on from that, where it actually may be taking us. This week's announcements, we have a few, so sit tight. First up, our team that is going to the semi-finals, the CrossFit semi-finals being held in Korea in just a couple of weeks' time, is being proudly and thankfully sponsored by Global Property Wealth Network. We thank them. We also thank the WOD guys. We thank Unbroken Supplements and we thank Palmer Investments for very different and very strong companies in their own field, supporting our semi-finals team to also be very strong in Korea. Thank you very much, Global Property Wealth Network, the WOD guys, Unbroken Supplements, and Palmer Investments. Second lot of announcements. If you reach this podcast in time and you are looking for something to do this Friday evening, which if you're late, it's not Friday you're thinking, it is Friday the 26th of May. There's two things that you can get involved in. Number one, you can get involved here at the gym in Final Fridays. Turn up and get involved in the workout. 2 workouts actually. Well, 3 kind of. Team of 4, lots of fun. It will be about 90 minutes. Get down to the gym Friday evening and get involved in that. The other one is if you want to go and do some running or some cycling, get hold of the endurance guys. Some of them are taking part in a nice little challenge called Into the Darkness this evening. Get in touch with them and they will tell you more about it. If you've missed that, that's okay. There's 3 other super fun things coming up. From the 1st of June, we are running Summer Madness, a new special membership that we're running for the summer months, June, July, and August. Drop us an email, winning@innerfight.com, to learn more and how you can get access to unlimited classes during those summer months here in Dubai. If you're looking for something a little bit different and to get your teeth tucked into, the Simple Life Project is coming back in June. I'll be letting you know more about that, but have a look out. It will be getting released next week. I'm early, but that's okay. And finally, another little tip off. There is a weightlifting competition coming soon. So if you are a Dubai-based listener or a member of the gym and you want to get involved in a weightlifting competition, stay tuned for updates. I will be giving them to you over the coming weeks, or follow, as always, our normal channels, Instagram, mailers. Does anyone use Facebook anymore? We don't really. LinkedIn. Who talks to us on LinkedIn? That is the announcements for this week. As I said, a massive thanks to those sponsors for our semi-final team, making it possible for those guys, or a little bit easier for those guys, to go and do good things at the CrossFit semi-finals over in Korea. That's it for this week. Let's get back to the show. This is episode number 807 of the InnerFight podcast, running and riding. No matter where you are in the world, thanks a lot for tuning in. Let's jump into today's show. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. As I said in the introduction, this is a little bit of a timeline to kick it off. And I want to give a little bit of context of why this topic came up. Most recently, I was riding with a friend of mine, Ed Menzies, and he asked me, mate, where did all of this start? And it made me think a little bit. What does he actually mean? And so I asked him, what do you really mean by that, mate? And he said, where did all the running and riding start? Fortunately, we're out for a relatively decent ride. So I had a little bit of time and I asked him if he wanted me to start at the start, to which he said, yes. And I sort of reeled off a few timelines and dates. And that's when I thought this could actually be an interesting show. And I got to a point with him in the conversation where I said, obviously, that's quite interesting to go through it like that. Hopefully you're interested in it, but I'm more interested in what I think the impact is. And I spent a lot of time after the ride reflecting on what actually the impact of these endurance sports, mainly running and riding, were having not only on my life, but also on the life of a number of people who now, fortunately and very thankfully, and we're always very grateful for the people who come to us here at InnerFight and InnerFight Endurance and entrust their bodies to us and their training to us to help them become better within many different areas of endurance and obviously in the gym, in InnerFight, in fitness as well. But I always have taken it as a huge privilege when someone comes and asks us to help their body and therefore their mind become better at something, especially when it is something like an endurance event or challenge or an ultra event, because I know that there will be many challenges along the way between often the coach and the athlete, also between the athlete and the athlete. But the ultimate result can be almost life-changing. I'm not sure how many times I will use life-changing in this show. I've said it twice now in the first couple of minutes, so we could maybe keep a track. But definitely, I think for a number of people, that is exactly what endurance sports can be. Any sport could be life-changing, actually. 3. We'll keep going. That's a fun game, actually, no, I won't go there right now. Anyway, where did it all start? And this is where I went to with Ed on the ride. My earliest memories of running and cycling were actually from my parents when I was young, growing up here in Dubai. I remember when we lived at the Trade Center apartments, they would run. I didn't know quite on what day, but in reflection, it was a Thursday afternoon. And they would, in those days, it was a 5.5 day work week here in Dubai. Friday was a full day off and it was a half day on a Thursday. And they would gather as a group of friends on a Thursday afternoon, normally, well, depending on the time of year, looking back at it and having discussed this a little bit with my dad recently, they would have a meet time anywhere between sort of 5 and 7, 6:30. Around what they would always try and do is finish the run before it got dark, so just a few minutes before darkness. So depending on the length of the run would be the time that they would set off. That would obviously change throughout the year. And what they would do is they just run, in those days you could run out of what was essentially the back of the Trade Center apartments and over through the desert. There was a couple of little sort of dirt roads towards Sheikh Mohammed's palace, and they would do this run every Friday. They would also sometimes do a run on a Monday night, and I don't think it was whilst we were living in the Trade Center apartments. So it was probably about 1985, 1986 when we moved out from the Trade Center apartments into a villa, which those of you that live here in Dubai and know where HSBC is, on Al Wasl Road, which was then called the Iranian Hospital Road, which is just opposite Safa Park, is where we lived. And they would Dad would meet his friends there. Again, a little bit dependent, exactly the same as happens now with InnerFight endurance rides, depending on the time of year. Summer, the rides were around 5 a.m. and in winter, it would be a lot later. And they would meet there on a Friday morning, Friday being the only day off. And then they would also meet on a Monday morning, I think around 5:30. It seems like they had a busy schedule on Monday because they'd ride in the morning and they'd run in the evening. So these are my early sort of childhood memories of running and riding here in Dubai and seeing my dad, my mum. Mum was an incredibly good runner. She would go to a lot of the races here in Dubai and win, be on the podium. And that was super impressive. I'm still proud of her now. I've still got some of the pictures that I used to always jump in when she was on the podium. And seeing dad and his friends and mum and a couple of the ladies as well running, I remember it always being just super inspiring. And I always wanted to join in with them. And they would tell me the routes that they were going to run and what direction they'd be coming back in. And it was interesting because in those days, there wasn't really, there was no Garmin. You didn't know how far you were going. So no GPS watches to know how far you were going. It was based on time. So they would tell me we're going out for about 45 minutes and we'll come back from this direction. So I would sit in the house looking at the clock, and with about 10 minutes to go, I would head out in that direction and try and run with them for the last sort of few minutes, and always start off running as fast as I could ahead of them. But then by the time we got closer to home and I'd been running for about 60 seconds, I'd be out of pace, out of gas, and they'd be increasing the pace towards the finish because, of course, they were all just good mates and they were racing the last kilometer as well. So these are the early, and as you can probably tell by the tone of my voice, or if you're watching on the video, the smile on my face, these are some really amazing memories I have of endurance sport, and I guess sport really as a whole in childhood. When you think back to it, you have a lot of, we were talking just a few weeks ago with Jeff Strachan on the show, and he was talking about different smells and what they take you back to in the deep heat in the changing rooms of a football match or a rugby match. These kind of memories always bring back sort of really nice smiles, and they're great memories. And I think that was really the start of my, I guess it was ingrained or link, you could say, to endurance sports. I started running when I was 4 or 5 years old to some extent. At school, when there was an option to run, because I'd been in this environment with my parents, I'd always chosen to run. And I remember some other early stages when I was sent off to boarding school and there was cross country, and I wasn't super good in the classroom, but this was something that I was quite good at, and I would run off the front. And even when I was just 9 years old, one of the juniors at the school went up to, I think, about 12 or 13 years old, I was able to hang up at the front with some of the top runners, which then starts to unlock in a boarding school environment. When I was in boarding school, started to unlock some, I guess you could say, special privileges, which continued as I went into my high school. And it was quite apparent that I was half decent at running, and I made the first 8 cross country in the first year there. So I was running with and against 18-year-olds. I then made the county team, I guess you could call it, represented the county at English schools. And I was always running with the elder guys. So that in itself got me, I guess, partially got me a lot of bragging rights, which is a little bit more ego driven, but also got me privileges in that I was allowed to go and train when I actually used to train in early mornings when all the kids were sleeping, which, looking back on it now, the cross-country season ran in the winter term, so from January to April in the second term, or January to Easter. And it was freezing cold, often snowing, and I was allowed what I still refer to as a privilege of waking up earlier than everyone else at about 5:30, going out in the snow, running in the forest on my own in pitch black. I'm not sure if everyone would consider that a privilege still, but I thought it was an amazing privilege. And I would probably be the most annoying kid at breakfast, because I'd come in and I'd be absolutely pumped from my run. I'd been up an extra hour than all the other guys, and they were just kind of having their breakfast, eating their cornflakes, and my energy and their energy was on a completely different level. So these are some of the, I guess, early childhood memories I have of running and what it meant. And it was, I think it was at my second school, at my high school as well, where I first started riding mountain bikes. And this was another huge privilege as well. And with it came a massive sense of, I guess you could say, freedom and expression. Also came a number of grazes, falls, broken parts on my bike, broken parts on my body. But that feeling of just going out on a mountain bike and riding through all the forests near my school was absolutely incredible. And I think because school was so regimented, it meant a lot to me to be able to go out and run or ride. And just for those, and it wasn't super long, I'd run for an hour, or I'd ride for an hour or 2 hours. It wasn't a super long period of time, but it felt incredibly free. And then some days we'd pull into the National Trust cafes and have probably a milky sweet tea with a stick of Walker's shortbread or something like that. So these small privileges still stick in my mind as something that was just special from the other kids. And I was able to do it because I was following these pursuits, which obviously gave me a large amount of motivation to continue to follow the pursuits. However, when I reached university, my focus changed a little bit in that there wasn't really, or I didn't find, actually, I think the reason why I stopped riding my mountain bike in university was because I couldn't fit it in my room. And I think it was too nice to put in the shed or something quite weird like that. So I stopped riding, but I continued to run. But because I was playing so much rugby, I wasn't able to balance it all. Basically, I was playing rugby twice a week, training 3 times a week. There wasn't actually much time for running, but I always had a standard that I'd be able to run 10K somewhere around 45 minutes. I thought that was something that everyone should just be able to do. I remember I grew up with my dad's friends. One of them was actually, a few of them had completed Ironman triathlons. One of them had cycled in the Commonwealth Games for Great Britain, and he was also an incredibly good runner. And he told me that a standard for running was to be able to do 10K in 40 minutes, which obviously still stands today, although a lot of people go a lot faster than that. I was like, well, through my rugby years and through my university years, to be able to run 10K in 40, 45 minutes should be quite good. And that's something that I held with me all throughout, even through my 20s. Although rugby was probably dominating, there was still a fair amount of running and, where possible, crashing my mountain bike. Fast forward to 2009, and I think that's really when the party really got started. After the Rugby World Cup Sevens in 2009, at the end of that season, one of my friends called me and said, let's run Dubai Marathon. And for those of you that heard this story, it's probably a way that a number of people go into marathon running. I said, yes. I said, let's do it in 4 hours. We went out and did about 3 or 4 training runs, and I ran 4:01. And it was absolutely heart-wrenching. I was gutted, and I thought to myself, I never, ever want to do any of this again. I guess that was probably the wrong thought in the moment, and it wasn't very long before I realized that it was the wrong thought. I actually went to lunch that day with someone who does listen to the show and told him exactly the same thing. And I actually shelved it. I didn't sign up for another marathon. I was just like, no, not now. And a few months later, a lady came to see me and she said, I need your help. I said, what do you need my help with? She said, I'm going to run an ultra marathon. At this stage, I had no idea what ultra marathons were. And she said it's 250 kilometers. She was doing one of the Racing the Planet ultra marathons in the Sahara. They have 4 around the world. And she was going out to do the one in the Sahara. And she said, I need your help. I said, I think I can help you with some of the tools I've got, but I've never heard of what this is, but I'll do some research. And if you're ready for us to go together and have a learning experience with it, then let's crack on. And that was probably the start of InnerFight as an endurance brand, because it wasn't long before a couple of friends, or although some people might not call them friends, sent me their accounts of they'd run Marathon des Sables in previous years in the early 2000s, and they sent me their reports from it, and I was just absolutely blown away with what these races were and how how this lady was going to run 250 kilometers across the Sahara in a Racing the Planet's race, not actually in Marathon des Sables, carrying all her own kit, and how these two guys that I knew so well had done Marathon des Sables. And it actually inspired me immediately to register for the race, which I pre-registered. This was 2013, and I got a slot for 2015. So that's kind of where a lot of it comes from. Why, I guess you could say, riding mountain bikes, riding road bikes, crashing them both, not by choice all the time. Maybe it's part of my growing up. Maybe it's part of the environment I was in. Definitely it's part of the environment I was in, but that's why it's something that means a hell of a lot to me. Obviously, where it started is hopefully important. I've probably taken a little bit too much time on that. But more important and more applicable to hopefully more people is the impact of endurance sports, and also maybe some thoughts on where they might go. Endurance sports create a serious impact, I think, on a personal level. They give you time in a world, especially now, that's insanely busy. And this is providing you are not a complete douchebag and take your phone and answer it when you're going out and doing endurance sports, because that takes this away from it. It's one of the only times that you have a serious amount of peace. And the longer you ride for, the more peace you get. The longer you run for, the more peace you get, because you shouldn't have a device with you. And I think that's something that's allows us the space to process different things, to discuss different things. I think in a way, and people have asked me this before, endurance sports are definitely some form of meditation. You could go into that in a number of different ways, and definitely we don't want to insult or debate with those who participate in maybe more traditional or formal types of meditation. But for some people, it feels quite meditative, that you go out there and you create quite a peaceful state. Some people are probably listening to this and going, mate, I've never been running or riding my bike and found any kind of peaceful state. And I understand exactly what you might be saying, and I hope that one day you do, because there are a lot of people that are, and this was one of the things as well in the early days of sort of helping people in endurance. I had a lot of people come to me and say, I'm not enjoying this process, and to train for something longer, be it a long distance triathlon or an ultra, is actually a serious chunk of our lives. It could be, for some people, 13, 15, 20 hours a week. And I was like, you're committing 20 hours a week to something that you're not actually enjoying. Why are you really doing it? And that opens up a whole sort of, not can of worms, but a whole load of really interesting and different conversations. A lot of people are doing endurance sports to numb something in their life. And I think that's okay for a short period of time, so long as you understand that and you are committed to finding out why you're actually really participating in endurance sports. A lot of people are doing that, but they don't know that they're doing that. And I like to think that's what we are quite good at, helping people to identify, that actually they don't love 20 hours of training a week, and they're doing it from a place of hate rather than a place of love. And that's a whole big debate as well. And sometimes anger is good to drive people. It motivates people in a number of different ways. But over the years, I found that it runs out quite a lot faster than love runs out. And it's quite a lot easier to wake up and do something for a number of different hours, a number of hours, if you actually really enjoy it. What else sorry, I went on a little bit of tangent there. That definitely wasn't in my notes. Other stuff that it impacts, and those that are into endurance sports and those that are into endurance sports might or might not agree with this, and those that aren't will probably not even see anywhere near where I'm coming from here. But it can be an insane amount of fun riding and running. I think for other reasons, which are the friendships that you can develop with like-minded individuals. Some of them, your only connection actually is through endurance sport. And perhaps, I see this quite a lot, you would never connect with these types of people did you not have endurance sports to pull you together? But some of the friendships that I've seen and some of the conversations that I've heard with these people over the years is actually also quite mind-blowing and really awesome to watch and to listen to as well, because people find people that, in the street or generally in life, they probably wouldn't interact with, but these running, and it could just be running. A lot of people just run, a lot of people just ride, and that's okay as well. I think there's a lot of people that run that hate on people that ride, and there's a lot of people that ride that think running is stupid, and I think that whole debate is a little bit childish, to be honest. I think if you like running, run, and if you like riding, ride, and if you like doing both, do both, and if you're an absolute psycho, throw swimming in there as well, and then you can play the triathlon. But I think the debate of cycling versus running is a weird one, but that's probably for another show. But we've seen some amazing friendships and amazing conversations, people having fun. Health is an interesting impact or outcome of endurance sports. And maybe some people are sat there thinking, well, 20 hours of training a week, endurance, how is that healthy? And I'll be completely honest, a lot of people are not training in a way that promotes their health. A lot of people are damaging their health because their goals or the amount of training that's needed to take them to their goals, when you combine it with their life stress, is actually not super healthy. And often say this for Ironman distance, so full distance triathlon, or even for ultra running, when you're in big training blocks, your health, there's a little bit of a caveat here, unless you're really able to manage yourself, your schedule, your life stress, your family life stress, your professional life stress. If you try and add 20 hours of Ironman or ultra running training onto a hectic private life, a hectic professional life, then for the most part, it is not healthy at all. And we always try and persuade people and help and guide people as well to make sure that they become better humans, healthier humans, rather than the other way around. And I saw a lot of this in the early years of coaching endurance athletes, that most people were just absolutely burnt out, and it goes to some quite nasty places where people are having to take a long time out of the sport and sometimes have almost permanent impact of being overtrained. So there is a positive impact of good health, and I think this is the same in any, not just sport, and any endeavor, whether, people damage their health through working too hard because they're just absolutely passionate about it. People damage their health in endurance sports from too much. People damage their health in the gym from too much. And it's really important to figure out, and that's what reverts back to what I was saying a few minutes ago about really understanding why you've taken up running or riding. And I also believe that there's a lot of misinformed people, and people are more in a race for ego, which often leads to health being compromised, which is not super cool. And my judgment, or my judge for this, or my gauge and measure for this, is always the same. You should be waking up in the morning to do your session, and you should be excited about it and feeling like you want to go and do it. And that goes for anything in life. And if you're not, then maybe you're not pursuing the right sport, maybe you're not pursuing the right career, maybe you're not pursuing the right relationship, maybe this could be a whole number of different things that you're pursuing that are not quite right. But I think more so when we're looking at these sports, there's a very small percentage of the population who are actually getting paid. We're all really just rank amateurs. Some of us take that a little bit more serious than others, but we're all just doing it to be a little bit better, and that little bit better is including our health as well. So you want to make sure that if you are running and riding, and if you are running and riding, I wouldn't call it excessively, but a lot, then please do make sure that it is positively impacting your health rather than negatively impacting your health. Another massive benefit from endurance sports is that a lot of no matter if you're into races or not, or and this is a big debate as well, people that have been traditionally trained a lot for structured races that are on days that are organized, that that people enter and race in and race against each other and race against their own times. There is also the fact that you can always go and do something, whether it's a run, whether it's a ride in a beautiful country. You don't need an official race to take place. So one of the great impacts of, or benefits of, endurance sports as well, and I think with a lot of sports, this applies. If you're into travel and adventure, then you will go, and you love nature, then you will go to some quite incredible places if you want to spend a lot of money on travel. It can get a little bit expensive, especially if you've got 3 or 4, especially if you live in Dubai and you've got different races around the world. But it doesn't always need to be. One of the biggest debates that we've got is how much races cost to enter and how much they're actually worth. And that's again, maybe a whole other discussion we should get on the InnerFight Endurance podcast and start to wind the guys up with how much Ironman charge to enter races and all of that. Someone's always got an opinion on everything, but there's a lot of chit chat about how much races actually cost. It actually costs, I've looked into this, and it actually does cost quite a lot to put races on. So races they do come, and they should come at a cost. However, one of the biggest things as well is to ensure that the organization are just nice people. And some race organizations, some race organizers, I've experienced it, and I'm sure a number of other people have experienced it as well, are not always super nice people. So if you're organizing a race, just be a good dude, charge a load of money, but be a good dude and make sure everyone has a good time. That's definitely something that we could have more of. What else positive? I think one thing, and this is what I speak a lot about in my corporate speaking, is I've formulated what I would call the ultra mindset, which through my ultra running is a way to approach a number of different problems. And these are not just specific to endurance events, but they work in life, in the business world, in my private life as well. So through endurance sports and through any sport, and again, this is not specific to running and riding, but through sport generally, we learn a lot of lessons for life. And I think if you're not slowing down from time to time and reflecting on the lessons that you're learning and the carryover that they have into other areas of life, then you're probably not getting everything you deserve from a sport. And it's not that you're taking more than you give. You go through the training, you go through the racing. Some situations will be challenging, some will be incredibly uncomfortable. You are allowed to take from that sport as well. And you should always be debriefing. That's why here in InnerFight, we do race plans, we do race debriefs as well, and we look at the learnings. And we don't only look at the learnings straight after the race, we look straight after the race, we look in a week, and we look in a month. And we're constantly looking back, to be honest, on different races that we take clients through to figure out what they learn and what we can continue to work on with them to help make them better in what they're doing. So there's a whole load of lessons, and these are some of the real positives of following. As I said, it doesn't matter what sport it is, but following a sport, a pursuit and hobby, and then reflecting on it to see how it's serving you and what it's delivering to you. There's a lot of debate as well about where the future of endurance sports will be. We saw through COVID when races got cancelled that people went, well, I'll make my own race, I'll make my own challenge, I'll be on my own, so I don't have to worry about COVID regulations. I think we continue to move towards adventure and experience being a large part of the goal rather than it always having to be a race. That's something that I've always felt. I mean, I think the first time I went out to Al Qudra and ran 50K around it in summer, just with a bunch of people, there was no race, there was nothing official. I don't think I even timed it anyway, was in 2015. So I don't think this desire for adventure and using endurance and training towards something that's not a race, I don't think it's something that's very new. Definitely after or during COVID, it exploded a little bit. I did hear that people were talking about, well, I won't go back to racing, but then they all do go back to racing. And I think there's something about racing that will always be valuable, and I think people will always enjoy racing because of what racing is and what racing does. And racing gives people a safety net in a way, and it gives them a clear goal and timeline to work towards. And it's not, this shouldn't sound like everyone that races has poor self-discipline, but it takes a lot more discipline to set a date in your mind and go and train super hard, where you have no race fee and no real other commitment other than your word for a lot of people. Some people can do it really easily, and for some people that's a real easy way, but there's always going to be racing because a lot of people still like to test themselves in the same environment to measure performance, increase or sometimes decrease. And I think that's okay as well. I think if that's what, again, gets you up in the morning and gets you excited, then you should continue to enter these races. For some people, it's a little bit of a safety net as well because it's all there and it's all organized, and that's what they need. That's what they feel, let's say, more comfortable to ensure that they're actually going to achieve this thing and go through the training. And to be honest, a lot of the lessons and the benefits also come through in the training as well as in the racing. So I think we've got this nice mix, and if races are good for you, do races. If going up to the top of a mountain and nexting yourself around for 6 hours really challenges you and doing it all through the night, then I think that there's a place for that as well. And I don't think that's different to what we've seen through a number of the years. I was talking to my dad about this actually yesterday when I ran my 30 marathons in 2018. I hadn't heard of many people that had done running like that back to back. And this might be because social media wasn't quite as big back then, but nowadays, I was just reading today, there's a guy who's running the length of Africa. There's also simultaneously a guy who is running across America, and simultaneously there's a guy in Wales who's doing 102 Ironman distance triathlons, so full distance triathlons in 102 days. Are we hearing more about this now, or are people generally just setting up their own challenges and getting out there and doing it more? I don't know. I think there'll always be races, and as I said, there'll always be people that will have opinions about race organizers. Some people love them, some people hate them, but I think we should just try and be good to each other because they're also important as well. I think ultimately as well, for some people, they will realize that racing in a race format is what challenges them for the right reasons, and others will figure out that it really doesn't excite them too much. For me personally, if there was never a formal race again, I wouldn't feel sad about it. I like them. I love running in a race. We were recently in Vienna running a marathon. It was awesome. People in the streets. I've run some amazing races. I got some amazing support during my marathons, but as I grow a little bit older, going out alone or just with a couple of mates is far more challenging as well. And that's one of the things for me, and I wrote about it actually after Rackman. I can just get in the car at any time and quit. Whereas in a race, you've got a lot of people spurring you on, cheering you. They've done it quite well in a lot of races where they put your name on the bib so that everyone knows your name, and that really lifts you up. But I love that, and I've loved that for a long time. Crowds are great and they've really spurred me on, but I think the more I move in the world of endurance and endurance events, the more I enjoy perhaps the solitude of being alone. I don't know. I want to close out with a couple of different, what I would call frequently asked questions, or things that people run by me when it comes to running and cycling. And I think the biggest question, I was getting interviewed on a podcast just a few days ago, and we were talking about my marathons, and the guy said to me, "Do your joints not hurt?" Which is always a question that I get asked. To be honest, no, they don't. And why would I lie? I have no reason to lie. When I have an injury, and this is the advice I want to maybe part on you guys, is that when you start to feel something is not going in the right direction, try and figure out why. I see and hear of quite a few people, not just in endurance sports, but in life generally, who are traveling around with what I would call chronic injuries. They're just not going away, but they tolerate them, and they've had them for a number of months. Again, this is not endurance related really at all. This is life related. And they either tolerate or medicate. They never really seem to go away. And that's how I treat my body, or I treat my body in the opposite way, in that when something does come on, I will always try and find out why. And if it is not getting any better, or if it is getting worse, I will make changes in what I'm doing. And I would just highly encourage everyone to do that as well. I feel quite not embarrassed for people, but I feel quite sad for people when I see them in insane amounts of pain, but they're continuing to pursue a sport. I'm not sure that that is really how it's supposed to be. There will be temporary moments of pain. It will not all be pain-free. There will be some suffering. It should only be temporary. You will get through it if you're physically and mentally strong enough, but I think we're heading in a bad direction if all those positive impacts that I spoke about and all the great lessons we learn for life come at the cost of not being able to walk in 15 or 20 years. Touch wood, I can walk now. I don't have any joint pain. Another question I get asked quite often is, how do you stay motivated? And I think, well, hopefully I've answered this sort of about 15 minutes ago when I said, no matter what program you're following, no matter what you're doing in life, you should be waking up in the morning and you should be excited to do it. Now, I'll put a small caveat on that. You're probably not going to be excited for every single training session every single day. If you are, that's absolutely awesome. If you can get it to a point where that's how you just go into every training session absolutely pumped, I debate it, because some sessions should be so hard that it's also hard to get pumped up for it. However, if you're able to go into, we'll go back to the old 80-20 rule. If you're able to go into 80% of your training sessions pumped, then that really is how you stay motivated. And if you're not, then you have to go back and you have to revisit why you're actually doing it and what it means to you. And what it means to you, if you have set a goal, be it an adventure, a travel goal, or a race distance, or a race time, what it means to you when you set it and what it might mean to you along the way could very much change. And that's okay. It's okay to sit down with yourself or with your coach and just reflect on how things have gone and realize that maybe the goal doesn't mean a lot to you anymore. And I actually did this with UTMB. I qualified for UTMB in 2022, having done a UTMB race in Spain in 2021, which UTMB 160 or 100 miles around Mont Blanc is pretty much the world championships of ultra running, of long distance, single stage, 100-mile ultra runs. And Rob and I qualified in 2021. And as the date got closer, I realized that actually it didn't really mean that much to me. And it was a difficult conversation to have with Rob because I'd committed to running with him. But I sat down with him one day and I said, mate, I think I'm out because this just doesn't mean enough to me. I knew that it would take a lot to get through it. And that race Rob finished it just under 30 hours. It's 100 miles, 10,000 meters elevation. It's pretty tough. It's the hardest or the world championships, but it just didn't mean anything to me. I wasn't motivated to do it, so I pulled out of the race. It doesn't mean that I go and get on the burgers and whatever. I carried on training for other things that motivated me. So you stay motivated by knowing what actually makes you happy and by checking in that you're actually happy and excited to get up each morning. The final question that I thought of, which I want to round out with and maybe leave you some thoughts with is, and I get asked this quite a lot, is when does it stop? When will I stop? When will I be satisfied? There isn't, with endurance sports, with running and riding, as you heard at the top of the show, it's kind of been in my environment, maybe in my DNA, in my blood since I was young, in my subconscious. I'm not going to get rid of that. And I don't want to get rid of it because a lot of the positives bring so much positive to a number of different areas of my life. Will it slow down? Maybe. Will the challenges get less? Maybe. But I don't think it'll ever stop. And I hope it never stops. As long as I can do what I am doing and get excited about it, it will continue. Once it becomes not so much fun anymore, then I will change direction. I think a lot of that is probably linked as well into self-reflection and self-awareness. And sometimes I think people asking me that question are perhaps trying to answer it for themselves. So my question to you is that question as well. Hopefully that was useful, a little bit of insight into, I guess it's been a very self-centered show, into my life of running and riding, some of the impact that it's had, how InnerFight Endurance perhaps started, a little bit of insight into that, and a whole load of ideas for other shows as well. But thanks a lot for listening. Hopefully you get some joy and satisfaction out of some form of running and riding. And if you don't, that's cool as well. Hopefully you find what makes you happy. Have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.